All right, folks, if you had only one whiskey to choose from to drink for the rest of your life, what in the world would that be? I'll tell you what mine would be, so stick around. All right, whiskey fam, so this is a whiskey challenge that comes by way of multicasking. Fellow YouTubers, Gene and Charlie out of Kansas, and definitely want to quickly recommend that you guys should check them out because, you know, they talk a lot of good stuff about whiskey, they know their stuff, and they have a lot of similar tastes in whiskeys that I do, so it'd be kind of interesting to hear their perspective on some of the whiskeys that they have in their area. So without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about what my soul whiskey would be. Now, before I do, just want to mention like the criteria. My understanding is if you were on a deserted island and it had to be a whiskey that was not rare, limited, allocated, something that's like a one and done type of thing, what would it be? So that way you guys would be able to enjoy it as much as I do, right? So let me at least talk to you guys about my runner-ups, starting with Balcones. This is a Texas single malt, and honestly, it was the whiskey that won me over to give Balcones like a true shot, because when I first tried a Balcones bottle, it was a True Blue, and I was not a fan. I just thought that it was just super oaky, but something convinced me to try other stuff. But once I tried their single malt, that is what made me start to go down the path of trying other American single malts. But this is such a classic whiskey to me. It was very hard to pick my number one over this one. It was sort of my next runner-up, if you will. But a lot of flavor, a lot of flexibility with what you could do with it, because these guys finish it in tequila casks, different wine casks, rum casks, you name it. So definitely one of those things that you could do a lot with it, especially in the whiskey world, but also in a cocktail. I would imagine that this is one of those whiskeys that are gonna be, you know, really good in all kinds of different things. So now let's get into my next runner-up. This is the Bruichladdich Port Charlotte. It's a heavily peated Scotch from Islay. And when we talk about Scotch and some of my favorite whiskeys, Bruichladdich is definitely one of them. And if you guys know me, have followed the channel for some time, you know that I'm really into peated whiskeys. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't pick the Port Charlotte, well, I was trying to think of me being on a deserted island where it's just me and I have just this one whiskey that a genie lets me drink for the rest of my life. And although I like smoky whiskey, I just couldn't see myself being on a deserted island and always drinking a smoky whiskey. Maybe something briny or another type of Scotch, but not the Port Charlotte. But it is my runner-up because when I think of a fantastic Scotch or a whiskey that is peated, that has all the right notes, Port Charlotte is one of them. And Port Charlotte is one of those that, you know, they're typically aged not just in like bourbon barrels, but wine barrels. So there's a lot of complexity, and it's just one of those fantastic whiskeys for me. But now, without further ado, let's talk about my monogamy whiskey. None other than, and if you guys know me, you kind of figured I would pick this, but this is Law's Cask Strength Rye. Specifically the San Luis Valley Rye. Now, why this one? Well, there was another rye that I had in mind, but it didn't make the cut, only because the barrel proof rye isn't as readily available, but this one is. So let's talk a little bit about why the San Luis Valley Rye is my favorite. Number one, this is the whiskey that won me over to fall in love with Law's. Originally, I started with their 4-grain bourbon, but once I tried the rye, I felt like I was drinking something very different from any other rye. The flavors were bold. They were just different. They were complex. It wasn't just a lot of baking spices. If you ever get a chance, definitely give the Law's Rye a shot. Try it, go to a bar if you have to, if you're just not willing to buy a bottle right off the bat. You don't have to take my word for it, certainly, but this is a truly unique whiskey. And the reason I picked it was I could drink this any day of the year. I never get bored of it. As a matter of fact, with my buddies and I go to Laws and we go to different events and they have all these different whiskeys out of their lineup, we find ourselves constantly going to the rye. This is just a fan favorite, not just amongst myself, but of my family and friends. And I feel like having such a dynamic whiskey that you could really drink at any time, this one is a no-brainer. And again, the reason I didn't pick another bottle was because I needed to stick to something that was readily available. It wasn't something obscure and it wasn't something rare or limited. And you can find these pretty much anywhere. And you can also buy them online too if you don't live in Colorado, which I don't live in Colorado, so I usually have to get their whiskey from Denver or shop online. So this is my monogamy whiskey, but there is one thing I wanted to mention. A little bit different than what Charlie and Jean pointed out, and that is what would be like that one whiskey with no holds barred would do it for me. Like I would really want to live with that whiskey no matter what, and it could be any whiskey in the world. It would be the 291 barrel proof single barrel rye. And in particular, a barrel pick that I did with our friends and fam over at the Albuquerque Whiskey Society. And if you notice, your boy Whiskey One picked it too. Now this was a fun one. And if I had no other whiskey to choose from, it would definitely be that 291. Such bold and like lots and lots of things going on. Like it wasn't just like that really cool song that you hear on the radio. It's that cool song that's like got all kinds of crazy things going. It's got some crescendo, some highs, some lows. Think of this whiskey as the Bohemian Rhapsody of whiskeys, right? Just a very interesting, different, dynamic type of whiskey. And it is also a rye, which rye whiskey just plucks at my heartstrings for whatever reason. It's just one of those things that, I think I could drink when it's hot, when it's cold, and it just does it for me. The proof alone also hits the high notes for me because I'm a proof hound. Now it's my turn to do a shout out and challenge the next friend. So legit whiskey reviews, I challenge you to pick a whiskey that you could live with for the rest of your life. The monogamy whiskey. And hopefully you guys get a chance to try this one just as much as I do. So this was fun. Again, thanks Multicasting for the shout out and for the challenge. Javier, love to hear your thoughts on what yours would be. So thanks guys for watching, and here at Whiskey One, it's about the one you enjoy. Cheers.